us, and so here they are, and we are seeing people coming in. This is great. I'm super excited about this. I know we've got extra time to be able to spend with you today, which is just wonderful. I'm very thrilled about it, and I know that lots of people will be getting lots of information. So yeah, we're getting people coming in, and that's wonderful to see. And we've had quite a increasing following over the last couple of weeks, more than a month, I guess, that we've been doing this. So it's been really nice to see lots of diversity. Lots of different people coming in and lots of different people speaking. And then of course, we're going to be continuing this throughout the month of August, and I assume into the fall, as long as people keep joining and coming. It's just absolutely wonderful. So we're very excited about this.
And I'll just sit here and maintain a straight face.
Okay, so welcome to After Lunch Special, everyone. And this is your chance to kind of kick back and relax and settle in with people doing great things. And boy, do we have a treat for you today. This is an extended edition. We're going to have, I believe, a full 25 minutes with this very esteemed Mark Waldman, who I know many of you have read his column before, Science and Spirituality. It's a wonderful column that gives us real insight into neuroscience. And so Mark is a lecturer at Loyola Marymount University. He's authored more than 14 books, and he's appeared on Oprah and recently released his latest book, Neurowisdom, the New Brain Science of Money, Happiness, and Success. I'm Reverend Karin, your host for today. And thank you so much, Mark, for taking time to be with us. I am so incredibly grateful that you are here and that we're able to share this time together with some real resources, some real practical stuff for people in this particular time. So I wanted to begin by just asking if you could tell us a little bit about this new brain network model that you've been working on.
And hopefully you had a chance to look at the last Science of Mind article, because this is the very first time that brain network theory has been presented to the general public. This is a whole different language has come across in neuroscience research, and we always used to speak about parts: the anterior cingulate, the insula, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, the amygdala. You won't hear those words being used so much anymore, and all of those old drawings that we used to see, they're not relevant anymore. So instead of looking at parts and how they and what functions those parts have, each neuron in your brain sends out a long axon. And so a neuron up here in your thinking centers can send an axon all the way back to your visual cortex. So if you close your eyes and you think about an image of somebody, even if it's an imaginary image, let's say you want to focus on spiritual energy. I don't think we can actually see that with our normal eyeballs, but we can envision it in some particular form. And so our thoughts can actually influence our visual cortex to create a perception of what we're thinking about, which is different from what our visual cortex is seeing in the outside world. So it's kind of amazing that these two little tiny areas up here, which is where your conscious decision making takes place, can shift the activity in all of these other brain networks. And there's 256 of them, but I've taken the honor to boil them down. I was working with a group of, what do you call it, a philanthropic group in the UK who works with adolescents who have had a traumatic brain injury, usually the removal of a tumor. And so you can't use words like the default mode network, that big orange area here that sits on top of your head, or your central executive network that's
right,
mostly focused in your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And so these are the core, the networks that you and I can manipulate with our thoughts so that we can become aware of how we're thinking. We become aware of how we're dreaming and wishing and imagining. And the interesting thing about up here, all your worries, fears, and doubts are also part of your imagination. They're not real. And this is important. This is how neuroscience is changing. This means that anxiety isn't all those things that we as psychotherapists have been telling you all this year. Anxiety is pure imagination mixed in with a little bit of memory, and that's all it is. And
that's a nice way of putting it.
You can just step back for a moment and you're feeling that worry, that doubt, and everything's going to collapse. And you remind yourself that no, there's this part of your brain, the default mode network. I like to call it the imagination network. That's what the I stands for up there. Its goal is to create all kinds of positive and negative scenarios that may or may not work to help you achieve whatever goal you want. It's attempting to predict the future. And it goes on about 30 or 40 times faster than you can ever become aware of or put into words. So when you and I talk, hopefully that huge activity up there turns off and we can focus our attention on those 5 or 10 words that you can be able to remember.
Right.
That you can't remember anything else I've said other than that sentence, right? But these are flat images. And I want to give you a much more 3D visual sense of what that imagination network is and what part of your brain is operating when you're just thinking about something, when you're planning, you're making decisions, you're weighing and evaluating, which parts of your creativity and which parts of your memory you want to bring into action to carry out a particular goal. So let me share that with you.
Please.
This to me is one of the most amazing images created as part of the human connectome process. And so you see this big yellow area here? That is so active that it just becomes a big blob. So that's that orange area here on my drawing.
Okay.
All these different colored lines that you're seeing, remember earlier I said these are the axons coming out from different neurons. So you can see like the green area in the middle. This is your anterior cingulate and your insula. This is your salience network. This is the part of your brain that all of our research on different meditation practices and Richie Davidson's research on mindfulness, this is the part that lights up the most. And when that green area is lit up, it causes less activity to go on in this imagination center. You spend too much time up here. Your mind is wandering, you're daydreaming all the time. You won't be able to focus on what you want to do. So what happens when you do focus on what you want to do? If you are going to say, okay, I want you to, for example, listen deeply to the sound of this bell. And you immerse yourself in that sound of that bell. And all you're listening to is that bell. You've turned down activity in that big yellow blob. Now you can focus your attention, not just on this sound, but you can say, okay, what goal do I want to accomplish over the next hour? This has to be turned off. And this is what happens. The rest of the brain becomes rather quiet. This is that dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is those 7 chunks of memory, of working information, the 10 or 15 words that you can remember me saying at any time. It's thinking. This is where your conscious thoughts are taking place. It's pulling up a little bit of memories from the past, a little bit of imagination from here, but the rest of the brain is rather quiet. If you spend too much time in this particular state, it's called work burnout, because it turns out that you have to go back and forth between your thinking network and your imagination network. When we're awake, ideally, you spend 50% of your time in both of these networks. When you're asleep, most of the imagination network is turned on and you can't even really think or plan for it much. That's the most active part of your brain when you're sleeping. When you wake up, you have to be able to turn it off. Now, dogs and cats, they have a very easy way of turning off all that activity up there. They'll yawn and stretch the moment they wake up. And that's why we're notorious for saying yawning, mindful yawning is the fastest way to turn off excessive activity in that imagination network.
So it actually brings you closer to focus by yawning.
Yeah.
It just shifts your brain.
So that goes down, and when you yawn mindfully and move yourself into it, you go back into this little tiny area here. So it's back and forth and back and forth. It's kind of like a seesaw. Too much imagination, too much mind wandering, too much creativity, and you can't focus on your, on your goals and your desires. Part of your creativity and imagination are all the thoughts and feelings that are going on, inside of that too. Most of the things that you are feeling right now, whether it be, that was wonderful, they aren't even actual emotions. They also are imaginary imaginations of what that thing tastes. Most of the time, we're not even tasting the food that we're tasting. We're eating mindlessly, and we don't, oh, here's a piece of chocolate. You pull up a memory right there. What you're saying, pull up a piece of chocolate. I remember how that tasted. And then you and I are battling along. I'm eating that brownie, or I'm drinking a glass of wine, or whatever else. We're not aware of what we're actually tasting. Mindfully, you slow down and you pay attention to the flavor the same way you paid attention to the sound of that bell. And you'll always discover that the food tastes different than you thought it was going to taste. Basically, most of the time, we are eating our memories.
We practice mindful eating at Christmas time. I think a lot of people do. They slow down, they taste that turkey, whatever it is that they're eating, and it brings them closer together because they're focused in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you have your imagination network, your default mode network over here, and you have your thinking network over here, your conscious decision making and planning and thinking about. But this thing that goes back and forth is regulated by a third network, the salience network. And salience is a cool word for it because it's kind of the same as savoring. It's what your brain considers to be the most valuable or meaningful. And the salient network is made up out of the core element of that blue area on here, is where that star is. You can see that all these different networks, your motivation network, your emotional networks, your imagination network, they all overlap. And that star is your anterior cingulate and insula, the key nodes, they want to call it now, of the salience network. And it plays a very particular role. It helps to balance out all those other networks. So the practice of simply taking a brief moment to sit back, relax, become mindfully aware of how you're thinking, you'll catch glimpses of all those different pieces of thoughts and imaginations and fantasies that are constantly going on up here, drifting in and out of your consciousness. And as you sit there and you become aware of, rather than thinking about it, which is what you do with those two little tiny areas here, that's what creates, as far as the newest research shows, an optimal balance between all of these brain networks that are associated with psychological health. So another way of putting it is that if you use your spiritual, contemplative practice of just observing and watching it unfold, that's what's going to create in that moment a better balance. You won't spend too much time getting lost in your imagination. You won't spend too much time over focusing, burning yourself out, and forgetting to access the intuitive, creative problem solving processes that are also going on up there.
Mm-hmm. So can you take us through some kind of an experience now so that we can feel what these different parts are, or something like that? That would be really helpful.
That's why I wanted to show you those pictures. If you listen to my words, you'll form some idea about it. Even this picture will give you some odd notion, But those two, images of what parts of your brain are actually being active in here, and all those little strands that interconnect with each other, hopefully will give you, and I want you to, literally memorize that. So I'll leave you know it and, come back to sharing my screen. Just remember, anything you're conscious of. So this is where consciousness is, as far as your being able to notice whatever thoughts or feelings you have, is in this little tiny area called your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And when that goes quiet, and it has to go quiet about every 20 or 30 seconds, that's all you can actually focus on before your mind wanders off. You use up all the neurochemicals, and when the yellow area comes around, you see these two dark areas. That's where your thinking network has turned off. See them right there in the front. And so that's shifting back and forth. And all of these other different colors represent different networks in your brain. There's the visual network. There is your motivation network, the purple part here in the bottom, and the dopamine that gets released that actually turns on your imagination to give you all those ideas and how you can achieve whatever goals your brain wants, your body wants, and what your creative imagination wants as well. So let me guide you through how to exercise these, because you don't have to do long-term meditation anymore to create this kind of balance. More importantly, to spend 10 seconds to 60 seconds, once or twice an hour, doing the following thing. So you're all listening to me. You're all basically, unless you've wandered off and, and doing something else. That's why I always like to have all the cameras on when I do this, because you can see who's wandering off. And anonymous really doesn't help you exercise your brain networks. Stay really focused with me right now, with your eyes open, because when your eyes are open, it's designed to pay attention to the outside world so that your brain, not necessarily you, can navigate that world to get what you want. In this case, hopefully you want some new information. The motivation center gets stimulated by anything that's new and interesting and different and potentially rewarding. The reward in this is, I'm going to show you how to literally exercise those three brain networks right now. So now you've been thinking about all of this. So I want you to close your eyes and see if you could do a few mindful yawns, which simply means just pay attention to how the yawning feels. Notice how that yawn feels. When you finish that yawn, just kind of be present for a moment and see if you notice any shift in your mental state or your mood. Karin, what did you notice from that first mindful yawn?
Well, I feel more relaxed, definitely. And
what do you mean by relaxed?
See, it's hard to explain. It's like I feel wider.
You see how it's hard to grasp words? You're in that state of awareness. Oh, you're not thinking about it anymore. There's something that you are aware of. And that awareness center isn't language-based. Thinking and planning uses all the words that we've stored in our temporal lobes. So this is a better model than what's ever been presented before in terms of what it's like to be aware. So you can teach somebody awareness. It usually will take you 8 weeks in a mindfulness course and 10 years in any other meditation program to realize that wonderful state of relaxed bliss. Relaxation is a word that we understand in terms of our body feels more relaxed. What does a relaxed brain feel like? So I want you and everyone else watching this to do another mindful yawn with eyes closed. And see if you notice any subtle shift in your mental state or your mood. Share with me whatever words come to you rather than thinking about how to describe that. That's using your thinking network. Now you're in the, I'm basically having you go back and forth between thinking and being
Right.
aware. You have to listen to my words, so you have to focus your attention. Then I'm having
Yes.
you do an exercise which requires highly focused attention, but then you sit back and you observe the result of that thinking activity. So what do you notice from that second mindful yawn?
I noticed, especially when the sound came in, like the combination of the yawn and the sound, I sort of felt again this feeling of bliss. And then as soon as you asked the questions, it felt like I was zeroing in on something. So it was again wide and then zeroing in.
Perfectly. I hope you're all having somewhat of that same experience, but everyone actually has a different experience. Whatever experience you have is fine. But that narrowing in is you turning on your thinking network, which in that process, you'll notice that your mind isn't wandering around. So you're using your awareness to become more attentive, more highly focused. You're exercising your salience network in relationship to your thinking network, your central executive network. But with this third mindful yawn, I want you to specifically pay attention to your mental state or your mood. So everyone, let's do one more mindful yawn. Fake it if you don't really feel like yawning, or just breathe deeply in through your nose. And you'll get better at yawning. The yawning itself actually turns down excessive activity in your imagination, becomes harder to mind wander. But do you notice any difference in your mental state or your mood?
Lighter.
Find another word. Lighter is still a bodily sense. Has your mental state shifted?
I feel happy.
That's still an idea. Does your mind feel busy or does it feel calm?
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't feel busy at all. No, calm. Yeah.
You're speaking, it's busy again. So everyone, see if you can shift back and forth between busily thinking and then stopping all those thoughts, just being in the present moment, which doesn't have words to it. So there are sounds and there are feelings and sensations, and that's why John Kabat-Zinn says, just sit there and be aware of any thought or feeling or memory or sensation that flows through you. So one more time, everyone, go back into that state of relaxed, mindful awareness. Notice how your thinking may have subtly changed. It may be hard to think about anything. But if you then just sit there and be aware, you'll begin to notice that in the background, there's all kinds of little tiny thoughts and feelings and impressions, partial thoughts. They're not really words per se, and they keep flowing in and out of your consciousness. It can actually become kind of psychedelic. But Karin, what do you notice if you just sit back and watch how your different thoughts and feelings and sensations are constantly shifting and changing? See if you can put into words what you become aware of.
Cat, grass, light.
Yes.
Door, sound.
This is your imagination network. It's constantly just putting together things all the time in unusual combinations that may or may not be useful for how you think about how to achieve your goal. This is just goal oriented. Awareness is simply awareness. I'm thinking about what I want. I'm aware of how I'm thinking, but you can also turn your awareness to that constant, it's called basically, it's called inner speech. And part of it's negative. Oh, maybe I'm not going to be able to achieve my goal. Oh, I'm going to go bankrupt. Oh, I'm going to catch a virus. Oh. And that's going on in just, one small part of the right side of that big yellow blob that we're showing. And the other side going on all the time As optimism. Oh, I can hardly wait. I'm going to get in my car. I'm going to drive over here. I'm going to have a wonderful meal. I'm going to open this book. I'm going to discover something new. I'm going to sit in this meditation and become enlightened. That's all part of your imagination. You can get lost in it very easily. You take your thinking, which is basically kind of like a magnifying glass. So, you can only zoom in on one little tiny, one tiny thing. Mm-hmm. And in this case, I'm looking at, I am going to be happy. I am going to be relaxed. I am going to this guy. But it's all me, 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 me. Yeah, mm-hmm. That yellow blob, you see the two blobs here are also activated, which is your parietal lobe, your sense of self. So your imagination is always playing with all the things that may or may not happen to you and me. And none of it's real. It's all imaginary. Here's what you can do with that salience network. Here's your shortcut to enlightenment, okay? Go back into that relaxed state of mindful awareness. When you're there, you are stimulating the von economo neurons in the anterior cingulate, the two structures that are the most active when you're doing this self-reflective, contemplative awareness. But you can ask your intuition, you can use your intuition, basically, salience network, to ask your imagination center for a creative insight to a discovery. So here's what I want everyone to do right now.
Okay, and we'll close with this.
Yes. So all I'm asking you to do is to close your eyes. And here's what I want you to do. Using your intuition, not the way you normally think. Let it tell you what is one thing that you found to be the most interesting, exciting, inspiring, or useful from anything I've said or anything you've done, and just see what pops into your mind. If nothing pops into your mind, you're enlightened. So what did you find, Karin, to be the most interesting, useful, or valuable?
I think being able to connect the feeling state that I have, like a physical feeling state in my mind, with which part of my brain I'm actually using. I don't know that I'd ever had that precision before. I had the feelings, but I didn't know where I was in that. And the piece that you shared about imagination and anxiety and that whole relationship between those two, I thought that was also very valuable.
So savor, everyone, savor whatever insight you have, which is, again, close your eyes. It's part of the salience network. This is what's valuable to your brain, your mind, your imagination, and your motivation center. And so that star in the center of this is that area being activated when you do this exercise, and you have access to all of the other networks. And it is the place that creates the ideal optimal balance for the key brain networks that are necessary to be psychologically healthy and to achieve the goals that you want. Mm-hmm. That's exercising your brain networks.
Thank you so much, Mark. I feel so focused now, and I'm sure our listeners do too, and creative. What better way to end? So thank you for all your time today.
So just take little pieces of time to think about what's going on, become aware of how you're thinking about it, and then use your awareness to ask your intuition for some kind of insight or discovery. You're in the present moment. Everything comes together.
Great. Thank you again. We'll put a few extra pieces on our Facebook page that'll send people into some new places and new ideas to search for. Thank you so much for your time, Mark.
There's a whole bunch of free ebooks that you can find on my website.
Wonderful. We will make sure those links are there. Thank you again.
Thank you.